Hi everybody, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. One of the things that we often talk about and contend with is trying to find time to go out and make photographs. And one of the common things that a lot of people complain about is their own neighborhood. This idea that, yeah, I'd like to go out and photograph, but my neighborhood is so boring, it's so ordinary, there's nothing out here to shoot. And I'd like to sort of dissuade you of thinking in that way, because I think that everyone's neighborhood, as far as potential subject matter, is completely subjective. I think if you have someone come from a different part of the country or even a different part of the world, they would walk into your neighborhood and find it amazingly interesting because they would be seeing it with a new set of eyes. And I've done a couple of personal challenges where I've gone into my own neighborhood to go out and find photographs, and I've surprised myself in what I have found when I've done it. So I know that interesting images are everywhere, even in my suburban neighborhood. But I wanted to pick some pictures that can sort of illustrate how you may be able to look at your own community with new eyes. All right, here we have a shot by Jason Ogulnik. This was shot with a Sony 6000 at 1/100th of a second, f2, ISO 400. Now, this shot was made in Vegas, but it's obviously not the Strip. And I think when people think of Vegas, they think of the Strip and all the amazing light shows that they have on that street. But this is off the main drag, and it's probably one of many liquor stores that are in that community. But Jason does a remarkable job in taking the color contrast between the neon sign and the cobalt blue sky and the white of the wall and the yellow curb stops and the human figure in the frame, and helps bring that all together for a really interesting composition. And what I like about the shot beyond that is just the fact that he takes a storefront that is incredibly ordinary and probably very ubiquitous throughout this entire country, and he finds an image there. And I think that that's the challenge, being able to find an interesting image in something that is so familiar and being able to look at it differently enough that you realize that if you include certain elements in the frame and you exclude others, all of a sudden you are able to reveal something as common, as familiar, as ordinary as a liquor store, and produce an interesting photograph. There are stores like this in my neighborhood, and for the life of me, I can't think that I ever thought about photographing any aspect of those stores in an interesting way. I have an interesting picture of a laundromat that's near me that I saw with eyes like this, but I think that that's one of the biggest challenges about being a street photographer, is being able to look at what's close to home with the same keen eye as you would when you travel to another location in the city or another location in your country or outside of your country, and all of a sudden you just see things and their potential for a photograph with fresh eyes. And I think that it's really important to look at your own neighborhood and to challenge yourself to see your own neighborhood with those sort of new, fresh set of eyes. Because if you can do it in your own neighborhood, you'll be able to do it anywhere. And I think Jason does a great job here building this composition with something that's pretty ordinary, but makes it an extraordinary shot. Okay, here we have a shot by Roy Savoy. This was shot with a Ricoh GR2 at 1/1000th of a second, f4, ISO 800. So this was shot in Williamsburg on the East Coast, and almost immediately you look at those pictures and you know this is the East. It's certainly not Southern California. For people who live in these communities, this is as ordinary and as commonplace as anything. And so they probably typically have a hard time imagining it serving as great fodder for a photograph. For me, man, I would just be having a field day in a community like this because it's so different from what I'm used to here in Southern California. I would be looking at these things with that fresh set of eyes that I'm talking about. And I think that Roy does a really good job in capturing all the details that make this place really interesting. The metalwork of the stairways, the security gates on the windows, just the facade of the building, the way the snow turns to slush. We have these images of the buildings and the other people in the background. All of this stuff, to me, is really fascinating because it's something that I'm not familiar with, and I like how this photograph reveals that. So it's not just a picture of someone walking down the street. It's really a document of a community at a given moment in time. And I think it's really important to think of your photographs in those terms, because if you take a look at photographs made of your community from 15, 20, maybe 50 years ago, or even longer, you're always sort of surprised at how things have stayed the same and how they've changed. And there's something exciting about taking a look at those photographs and trying to find evidence for things that have remained fixed in time, seemingly, and how other things have sort of evolved and changed and been transformed over time. There's a real power to photographs as time passes, and that's something to sort of keep in mind when you go out and make photographs in any community, whether it's your own or someone else's. This shot, I think, has a timeless quality about it, but there are evidences and signs of the fact that it's sort of a contemporary shot. But I'm sure that within 15 to 20 years, someone will take a look at this picture who's familiar with this area and will recognize how things have changed. And that's part of the fun of photography, in that how it not only sort of freezes time, but how it can serve as sort of a measuring stick for how things evolve and change. And regardless of how ordinary or mundane your community may seem to you, to someone else's eyes, it's completely something different and exciting. Okay, here we have a shot by John Krill. This was made with the Fuji X Pro 1 at 340th of a second f11 ISO 400. So this is a shot at a Costco. There's a parking lot. This guy is pushing these carts into the store. You see all these other cars in the background. And this is as ordinary as anything in America, man. You see this everywhere, whether it's on the West Coast, the East Coast, in the Midwest, in the South. You have a Costco or one of these big box stores, and you see people pushing these carts into the stores and people milling about. This is as mundane as you can get in terms of how we live today. And John does a really wonderful job in capturing the shot of this person moving all these carts into the store. And again, I think about sort of perspective. There's a shot by William Eggleston, which this picture reminds me of a young kid pushing carts into a store. And it's pretty much the same scene. But when you take a look at William Eggleston's shot, you see the way the kid's hair is, the way his outfit is. You may see some of the cars, and you really get a sense of that moment in time. This is probably the late 50s or maybe the 60s. And probably at that moment, that was probably the most ordinary scene in the world. And people would have likely looked at that shot or seen William Eggleston making that shot and going, why are you taking that picture? And then years later, as people take a look at that photograph, they just marvel at what he was able to capture in such an ordinary scene. John is kind of doing the same thing, even though it's not a color shot. This is a sort of a black and white shot, but it's so ordinary and it's so common that I think a lot of people would think, why are you taking a picture of that? But I think graphically, it's a very interesting shot. I love the repetition of the carts. I love the angle of the body and the gesture created by this guy's body. I like the tonality of the shot. But again, it's a matter of perspective, isn't it? In terms of how we'll take a look at this shot 10 or 15 years from now. That's one of the marvelous things about street photography, I think, is that there's a legacy to it. That goes beyond, whatever pleasure or satisfaction the photographer can achieve in the moment that he or she makes the photograph. If the images outlast us, which is something that we all hope for, we're hoping that the street photographs are not only sort of pleasing as an individual photograph, but they are somehow a testament to who we were, not only individually, but as a people at any given time. And that's one of the reasons why I love looking at street photographs that were taken years ago with the simplest film cameras sometimes, and just marvel at how people were able to see the world. Yeah, we have digital equipment and all this amazing technology, but really, in the end, just comes to how interestingly can you see your world as it is today. And when people do it well, it's fantastic. All right, hope that was helpful to you. If you've never heard of the Candid Frame and you're first discovering it as a result of these YouTube channels, the Candid Frame is a podcast which features conversations with photographers from all genres of photography from all over the world. And you can check them out for free by listening to the podcast. You can visit the website at thecandidframe.com where you'll see the blog posts, and you can actually stream the audio over the website. But you can also just download the Candid Frame app, which is available for free for Windows, for Android, and for Apple iOS. You'll find links for that on the website if you scroll down here, and there'll be links to download the apps for your respective smart device. And you can listen to interviews like the one I had recently with Matt Odom, who is a photographer in the South, who is a commercial photographer who has made a quite successful career as a commercial photographer, even though he isn't living in a big major city on the East or West Coast. So if you're interested in how he manages to have a career as a commercial and a successful commercial photographer while living in a relatively smaller town, you should check out that interview at thecandidframe.com. And if you want to contribute images to the Candid Frame Flickr poll, you can simply go to Flickr, do a search on the Candid Frame, and ask to be added. I usually get to it once a week. So if I'm delayed in responding to your requests, don't worry. I'll get to it eventually, and then you'll be able to submit images to our growing community of photographers here. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.